Good afternoon. Welcome to today's presentation, Transportation, a Natural Vehicle for Integrated STEM Learning. I'm Glenn McRae, the Director of the Northeast Transportation Workforce Center at the University of Vermont, hosting today's session. As we're getting started, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Emily Parkini of the University of Virginia, who's the webinar subcommittee lead for the TRV Training and Education Committee, today's lead sponsor for this workshop. Emily?
Great, thank you, Glenn. So I also wanted to welcome everybody to today's webinar. And as Glenn says, my name is Emily Parkini. I work at University of Virginia. I'm excited that we have so many people on our webinar, but part of what we're trying to do with our webinars is host them so that people can attend them for free, but also have the archives available for people. We've put together a resource page for this webinar, which I think we'll be talking about as we go here. And so I think it's really the recordings and the resources that are also available to everybody that's a big deal. So as you can see from this slide, we do have, last year and this year we put together 5 webinars, and I really appreciate the variety of topics, but also that we've been co-hosting these with others. And so this one, like the one in March, the National Network of Training Workforce Centers, Transportation Workforce Centers has co-sponsored these, and this one we definitely appreciate the co-sponsor with the NETWC for this one. But please look at these topics, and then also please join us in October for our Power of Diversity, Attracting and Engaging Diverse Groups in the Transportation Industry webinar. And so that one and our webinar last September were co-sponsored with the American Public Transportation Association, or APTA. So again, I appreciate everybody being with us and using the resources and things that the TRV Education and Training Committee has put together. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Dr. McRae. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Emily. We've got a nice spread of participants from around the country. We appreciate everybody's interest in this, and particularly we'll appreciate your participation as we go through it and hopefully initiate a lot of questions from today and a continuing conversation after the webinar is over. Today's webinar, as I said, is hosted by the Northeast Transportation Workforce Center, one of the 5 members of the National Network for the Transportation Workforce. These are 5 centers that were created by the Federal Highway Administration and are working together to provide a more strategic and efficient approach to transportation workforce development. The centers work through state and regional and national partnerships, such as that of today with the TRV Education and Training Committee, to advance these initiatives in support of a more skilled and resilient workforce for the future. I'm really pleased to introduce today's panel that is going to speak to the value of STEM learning environments outside the classroom with a focus on transportation skills and career applications. They'll be sharing with you some of the programs that they've helped develop to meet the needs of transportation personnel and an understanding of the transportation field in general. Hope that the programs they share will provide ideas for your own workforce development and education activities. We have with us today Martin Storksdieck, who is the director of the Oregon State University Center on Research on Lifelong STEM Learning. And Martin's going to provide both an overview of the field, kind of both the theory and the basis of what all of our panelists are going to speak to, and then he'll come back at the end of the presentations to give a wrap-up. We have Marcia Ferranto, who is the president at WTS International, Helen Blackman, director of the Office of Organizational Culture and Work at the Volpe Center, and Brett Nichols, the manager of community initiatives in the Center for Advancement of Science at the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry. Really want to thank all of you for participating today. Just a few ground rules before we begin. If you have questions for the speakers, please put them in the chat pod. So you should see on your screen a chat box. You will be able to send questions or your thoughts for consideration by the speakers. We'll assemble those for asking the speakers at the end. If we run out of time, we'll ask the speakers to respond to any of the questions that we didn't get a chance to answer and post them on the webinar site. Also, if you have an audio or video problem in joining or experiencing the webinar, please go ahead and as well put that into the chat pod, and some of our staff will see if they can reach out and help you solve that problem. Please note as well that the webinar is being recorded. We do this in order, as Emily said, to start to assemble some of the best practices around the country addressing transportation workforce education and training that can be experienced by people both in real time, as we are doing today, but also as a continuing resource for the future. So with that, our first presenter, Martin Storksdieck, as I said, he's the director at the Oregon State University Center on Lifelong STEM Learning, and he initiated the NAS report on out-of-school STEM education when he previously worked at the National Academies. So he's going to present now in terms of setting the context for our overall discussion. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you. And here we go. I need to get my screen. I think you will all see it now. I'm still waiting to, okay. So I'm very happy to be here and provide a bit of a framing for this conversation. I think it's an important conversation. I want to reflect on not just the report, but broadly speaking on how out-of-school learning and school-based learning come together right now to allow us to tackle bigger problems, bigger issues than the typical physics, chemistry, and biology way of thinking about the world. And so my reflections are on how this might actually connect to transportation literacy more broadly speaking. And the first thing I think that's important for me at least is to frame what I understand learning is. And I come to this from a biologist perspective. That's my original training. And what you see here is my son sitting outside when he's a year and a half grabbing a stick, learning something here. And what we know, of course, is that we as human beings don't come to this world like let's say a zebra comes out and very quickly can walk around and eat and just needs protection. We really have to adapt to our physical and social environment as part of our evolution and part of us not being perfect when we come out. We are imperfect beings that as we grow, use learning to become better adapted to our environments. It is an ongoing process. One thing that we often forget is that the brain, just like the heart, never stops. We learn whether we want it or not. And that is a component of learning that allows lots of different perspectives to play in when we think about this and where it happens. The somewhat other, however, more conservative component of learning is that when we learn to adapt to an environment, we build very quickly assumptions about the world. We build on what's tried and true. And once we have a sense of how the world functions, we are loath to change that. It's called oftentimes misconceptions. So it's very important to get things right in the beginning or to develop learning experiences that allow us to change our perspective. All learning is individual and need-based. We have different personal and environmental spheres, and so our brain is adapted to the notion of getting it right for our environment. And of course, that asks the question, what is a school? Certainly not individual and need-based. And ultimately, we are group animals. We do this collectively. We are embedded into a social environment, and we both learn about our social environment as well as with our social environment. So learning is all these things. It's a verb and it's a noun. And that is something to keep in mind as we go into this question of where we learn and how we learn lifelong and life-wide and life-deep. So what is a personal learning ecology? Well, normally we think about learning as synonymous with teaching, and that is then synonymous with schools. And the problem with that is that a lot of things that we learn are not discipline-based and school-bound. When you think about the big topics in life, like food, where do we get our food? What about health? What about energy production and consumption? What about security? The social institutions, including legal institutions, transportation, of course, and many others. They don't fit into disciplinary topics that are being taught in school. They're oftentimes interconnected in dramatic ways, and schools tend to not really focus on them. We teach physics, we teach chemistry, we teach geography, and so on and so forth, English literature, and we try to put these topics to a degree in there, but we don't tackle them comprehensively. So that basically suggests that we need to learn it somewhere else. And of course, the other thing is we don't really learn about things best when we look at books or sit in the classroom with 30 other people. We learn it where it happens. And when you think about transportation, when you think about energy production, food production, the best thing to motivate us to learn and get a sense of what learning is to go to the places where things happen. One of the interesting components of understanding out-of-school learning is just how prevalent it is. There is various types of statistics that basically say that most of the learning that happens outside of schools. Formal education is very important, of course, because it lays foundations, but we play on that foundation in that we learn what we learn most of the time in other places in schools. When what you know as a 45-year-old is probably oftentimes not based on anything you learned in school, but it's based on something you've learned in school and then played with later on as you encounter things on the job, in life, and so on and so forth. Now, we have developed a sense of a learning ecology around a person. And when you think about this, what makes people learn? Take this little boy here again. He is surrounded by a lot of individuals, role models, friends, family, caregivers, mentors, peers, that influence what and how he learns, what he's exposed to, what experiences he has. Now, these are surrounded by all sorts of institutions that facilitate learning. They may be, schools are certainly part of that when you look at about 9 o'clock. The job, community-based organizations, the community itself, including places there, media, our hobby clubs, the library, after-school environments. All of these develop this kind of rich network that exists around us that allows us to learn about the world. And our claim here is that it would be nice if we were to connect this rather than keep it isolated. Now, these institutions are surrounded by a whole lot of societal institutions, be it our policies, our funding, our norms, the values, the social cohesion we have, regulations we have, culture. All of this influences how these organizations influence the learner, how they influence each other, and how they grow. All of this changes over time. Our claim here is, and it's not a very good representation, that this is all connected. And that in order to make particularly things happen in terms of learning that are not school-based, we need to be aware of that path that this little boy takes over time and within its community, making connections between all these different learning opportunities that allow him to understand the world, including, of course, important things like food production, like health, like transportation that are so essential to the way in which our societies function. Here you see him on my shoulder at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum looking at some animals. Now, what is connected learning? Part of that is that this learning ecology I just talked about is made explicit to the learner and is actively connected. So learning experiences are not isolated and all done individually. We make it coherent to the learner. We create the community capacity to link these institutions. And what I mean by that is the first one is, of course, you learn it somewhere. The second one is when you learn it somewhere, where you learn it, let's say in an after-school club, makes a connection to another after-school club, or says you can learn it in school. But the idea of the capacity of the community is that we are becoming aware that we need to create these institutions and link them together. We need to train all of our educators in a community to think not just about facilitating learning experiences where they are, but to make these connections to other places and potentially work and collaborate together. We need to understand to a large degree what's missing in our learning ecology. And then ultimately, we need to make it apparent to the community and celebrate that we have this learning ecology where people can learn across a lifespan and across different settings. Now, we have developed over time some understanding published in various books from the National Academy of Sciences on what successful learning, particularly in informal setting, looks like. And I'll have these 6 interwoven strands here. They basically say one thing. That's strand number 2, that we normally focus on. Just learning the stuff isn't enough. It now is our understanding that for people to learn best, whether that's science, and I would argue, we had another publication at one point that said this might actually expand to history and other kinds of fields. You need to be excited about it, you need to be motivated to learn, then you learn the stuff, the idea of generating understanding, remembering, or using concepts, and so on and so forth, related to the subject matter. Then you have to be actively exploring it, this kind of hands-on, minds-on kind of way where you manipulate, you test, you explore, predict, question, and so on and so forth, the world. You want to reflect on what that learning looks like. You want to be as possible actively participating in it. That's the strand number 5. You want to make it as real as possible, think citizen science. And then you want to develop a sense of who you are as a learner related to that subject matter. What is it, who am I related to this field that I'm learning about? What's my identity as a learner, and potentially as somebody who's going into a field and makes that my job, or at least I understand what I need to know about in order to be a good citizen. These 6 strands are not outcome buckets. They're basically, we hypothesize, they need to come together if learning happens actively and successfully. Now, there's some glue between informal learning now and what is being done in schools. And that has to do with these new science standards that have been developed and kicked off by the National Academy of Sciences, where there's a new model. And the new model is 3-dimensional learning, where we take the content in the core disciplines, in the physical sciences, the life sciences, the earth and space sciences, and now engineering and technical applications of science, and mix that with cross-cutting concepts, the kind of glue between the disciplines that live in all the different disciplines themselves, like patterns and cause and effect, and for instance energy and matter, and then blend that with 8 scientific and engineering practices and make these practices the core. Now we're basically saying, don't learn science by regurgitating facts. Do something that we've seen is a component of informal learning, which is be active and use scientific and engineering practices as a gateway into understanding the stuff. This model, however, is to a degree insufficient because we don't learn for school, we learn for life, as this Latin term non scholas et vitae decimus says. And we've now learned a lot about these 21st century skills and how important they are. And they include, for instance, social skills, being able to communicate, to reason, to show empathy and tolerance, learning skills. We need to learn how to learn, identify ourselves as learners, have self-reliance, and so on and so forth. We have to have, of course, the thinking skills that everybody is so fond of, the non-routine problem solving, the creative and innovative ways in which we think and work around the world. And then the decision skills, being able to decide under uncertainty, optimizing, showing commitment to solutions. All of these things are important just as much as implementation skills. Persistence, resilience is being talked about a lot, oftentimes termed grit. It's something different, but the idea of risk-taking in an appropriate way, being goal-oriented, or harnessing and using resources. All of these things, as we can see, are not related to any particular discipline. And that makes them so strong. That's what employers want. I think what's important here is then to realize that when we look at all of this, put it together and ask ourselves, how does this all happen in out-of-school settings? And here are 2 reports from the National Academy. One was given as a resource, the one to the left, identifying and supporting productive STEM programs in out-of-school settings, and the one to the right was done, STEM learning is everywhere, more from a teacher's perspective. You get to some basic rules about using your community and who is part of that. And that's important. That's basically the final message here, which is we have designed settings that are part of our rich ecology. That is schools and clubs and museums and youth programs, but also real-life settings in our community, whether it's a power plant, whether it's a food processing plant, whether it's the mayor's office or some other kind of employer. They are naturalistic settings. This is basically, we can learn within and from nature directly. We can go to parks and waterways and forests and so on and so forth and see and for ourselves. They are people and networks of people. And these don't just include educators, whether they are in formal or informal settings, but they include hobbyists and other kinds of enthusiasts and business leaders, and anyone who can be a role model or facilitator of learning within our community. And ultimately, we need to be aware of the power of everyday encounters with STEM and other kinds of issues that we can have when we are on the internet, when we watch television, when we're on the playground, and going about our lives in all sorts of different ways. And the trick here for us, I think, as we are looking into a complex topic like transportation, is to become aware that this happens and this can be learned at all levels. And I think because we said this is a way to integrate STEM, transportation is certainly a lens through which you can, for instance, teach the standards in schools in the United States now. It's a way in which many museums actually tackle interesting topics, and we probably hear from that quite nicely. Many museums have, science museums have transportation issues. But I would argue that one of the things that makes it even richer is when you allow the student, the learner, to be in the environment in which transportation happens, whether that's transportation for people or for goods or for information. And to realize that it's way beyond STEM, that transportation involves not just the physical and the engineering component, the science behind it, but also the rules, the regulations, the institutions, and all the complexity that makes it such an essential component of our life. It is a fantastic example of making use of a learning ecology to show just how diffuse and embedded the component of transportation is in all of our lives. And with this, I'll be happy to take questions later through the chat box, and would be interested to see how this plays out in our examples.
Great. Thank you so much, Martin. That was a really good framing, and I think we're going to see some really excellent examples of many of the types of approaches that you framed for us. Kind of setting our context, you should be seeing up on your screen right now a quick poll, and if you could just vote in helping us understand what sector of the transportation industry you represent. So we're just trying to get a really quick overview here. So go ahead and take care of that, and we'll come back to it when we come over. So we're getting a little bit over, so about 3/4 educational institutions, state employers, private. Very good. So that just gives you a sense of kind of who is on with us right now. So we're going to move on to our first program panelist. That is Marcia Ferrento. She is the President and CEO of WTS International. WTS International is a network dedicated to building the future of transportation through the global advancement of women. Marcia's been a long-time active change agent, and in her role at WTS, she's helped grow the association's membership, engaged new corporate partners, expanded its reach throughout the industry. WTS has a number of really exciting programs and initiatives, particularly within the transportation STEM field, and Marcia's going to talk very specifically about their program Transportation U, as well as some of the other priorities. Thank you for being here today, Marcia.
Thank you, Dr. McRae, and thank you for having me here. I bet it's a lot nicer up in Vermont than it is in Washington, D.C. today. We are experiencing quite lovely weather here. So let me talk a little bit about what we're doing at WTS here in Washington and around the globe. We are focusing, as you described, on advancing women. We are focused on workforce development, and we have been around since 1977. We have 56 professional chapters. 53 of them are in the United States. We have 2 in Canada and 1 in the UK. and we have 13 student chapters. And as you mentioned, we are building the future of transportation through the global advancement of women. And why we find it, our mission, so necessary today is because during the time, during, when we look back on history, the transportation industry has been, if you want to visualize it, picking from only half the tree. So it has been a very male-dominated industry, and that half of the tree has been picked over very well, and we have an incredible group of professionals on the other side that have not been tapped. And so WTS's mission is to help attract, retain, and advance that other side, the side representing women in the industry. And so as we approach our mission every day, we can't talk about STEM without talking about retention. And we can't talk about STEM until we also talk about advancement. When you look at the last statistic I read, less than 2% CEOs in transportation are women. It's really difficult to attract young people, young women in the STEM fields, and it's hard to convince them to choose transportation when they look up and they might not see any or very few representation that actually represent women. So back in 2010, WTS got together with Secretary LaHood, and we together formed an MOU to create a mentorship program called Transportation U, capital Y-O-U in pink. And Secretary LaHood signed this MOU in 2010, and it was a blank sheet. We didn't really know which way we were going to go, how this program was going to be most useful around the country. And we worked a year to establish a toolkit that could be used in every pocket of our country that we have chapter representation. And in this toolkit was represented different activities that WTS chapters could embark on, whether they were in New York City, St. Louis, Maine, or Sacramento. So we currently have 40 chapters who have engaged in this program and that have active programs across the country. And so with all your listeners today, I think there's an excellent opportunity for your listeners to take a look at this program in their local community and learn what the local program is doing in the area of STEM to help attract and build the awareness that transportation is a viable career choice for women, and possibly get involved. One of the things that we also do through our Transportation U program is we hold a transportation boot camp here in Washington. In fact, we just had it last month, where we brought in 50 of our mentors and mentees into Washington and exposed them to areas of transportation that many of them didn't even know existed. And this was our 5th year of doing this. We exposed them to ideas such as accessibility and connectivity, and how it's important for neighborhoods to be connected to their educational offerings, medical service, their jobs, and so we bring in these teams into Washington, and we expose them to behind the scenes at Metro, and we take them up into the tower of Reagan Airport, and we have taken them through the Dulles Toll Road. And so these are experiences that that we're offering them and opening their minds to the fact that they don't know everything at the age of 17, and that there are many many ways to to experience, to have the experiences that can lead to lifelong decisions in their careers. So one of the things that I would like to offer as I close, and that's a very important takeaway for all of you who are listening in the transportation industry, and that is, as professionals, it is very important for us to be mentors. As transportation professionals, it is essential that we are mentoring, and that wherever we live and whatever position that we hold within the transportation industry, whether it's education, private, public, with the workforce gap that is facing our country today, that I cannot stress enough how important programs like Transportation U are, and how really important it is for you to spend some time each month and mentor a young person coming up in the field. So with that, Dr. McCrae, thank you so much for having me, and I will be glad to take any questions at the end of the webinar.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Marcia. I mean, I think, this is a really excellent example of being in the field with young people, exposing them directly to how the system actually works, both how people run it as well as how mechanically the system actually evidences itself, and something that can be and is replicated in communities around the country. We'll come back to more of that. Just trying to get a sense again from our participants in terms of how do you actually interact with this? Are you someone who's actively taking a role in advancing STEM education programs directly? If so, please answer yes. And we just want a quick sense of, again, who the audience is with that. Again, just a reminder that as you think of questions or have thoughts that you want to share with us or with the panelists at the end, please use the chat box, enter it in there, and we'll be accumulating those questions for the end as we go forward. All right. So again, a good majority of you actually actively engaged in doing this work. That's terrific. Well, with that, I want to turn to our next panelist, Helen Blackman, who's the Director of the Office of Organizational Culture and Work Life at Volpe. And Helen coordinates and really facilitates a number of really innovative and very engaging programs directly with a wide range of employees at the Volpe Center, the National Transportation Systems Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And these kind of span across a number of the types of programs and program approaches that Martin detailed. And I was just in awe, really, of the types of programs and a really long conversation Helen and I had back in the spring, and I'm really pleased that she's here to give us an overview of some of that engagement with that community. So with that, Helen, welcome. I think we're having, there we go. And Helen, do you have your mic on? We're just having a momentary difficulty. Please bear with us.
Hello?
Hi, Helen?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Very good. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Great. So, Glenn, thank you so much for having me here at during this webinar. So what I wanted to do is, I think it's actually fitting that I go right after Marcia, because actually the Boston chapter of WTS president is actually a Volpe employee. Her name is Rachel Sachs. So we work very closely with the WTS and have done some really great work with them. So let me just get started here. Seems to be going very slowly on my screen here. While I work on that, let me just tell you a little bit about the Volpe Center and who we are. The Volpe Center is a research arm of the U.S. Department of Transportation, and we are under the Office of the Secretary. We have been in the Cambridge community for over 40 years and have done a lot of work in the Cambridge community. I'm trying to see if I can move this forward here. What we wanted to do, as I indicated, we have been in the Cambridge community for over 40 years, and we really felt that it was very important for us as an organization to really reach out to the community, not only being a great corporate citizen, but also being effectively all as well, just encouraging students to potentially come into the field of transportation and ultimately come to Volpe Center and see us as a potential career opportunity. If you could advance the slide. The next one. Sorry for this problems with the slides. Okay, great. Wow.
Helen, Omed,
could you bring up the slides for us? Yeah, I sent my set of slides to Omed. If you can bring it up, because I'm having problems on my end bringing up the slides.
Okay, just let him know which slide you want.
Yeah, they should be up right now.
Yeah, I can't see them on my screen.
We're on the outreach slide right now.
I can't see it. Okay, great. Apologize for all the difficulties here. So what we wanted to do at Volpe Center was to really promote STEM careers in transportation by connecting youth with Volpe expertise and passion. We know our staff are very passionate about the type of work that we do, and to that end, we really wanted to encourage students to look at Volpe as a potential place in which they could see themselves. So what we did was we started in earnest in July of 2015 with a STEM policy order that was developed. We were able to encourage the leadership of the organization to really stand behind the STEM activities, and to the extent that they were even willing to offer employees up to 8 hours of administrative leave to participate in STEM-related activities. We had in fiscal year FY14, we started with 3 events, so we started pretty small and picked up in FY15. We had 9 STEM events and also a new STEM program that we implemented called NETWC program. With that particular program, we reached out to the Cambridge School volunteers, and what we did was we reached out to our employees and talked about the opportunity to mentor, just as Marcia was talking about earlier, mentor students in the Cambridge communities. So our employees were matched with 7th graders in the Cambridge community, and what they do is throughout the school year, they email those students, the students email them questions, science-related questions, and they work on a particular project. And ultimately, at the end of the year, there's a science Olympiad where the employees help the students to put on that particular event. And this year, we've had at least 7 STEM events. I think there's been more since that time. As well as the NETWC program. We've done the 2nd year of the NETWC program, and the North Carolina State University and Wellesley College. We've been working on some partnerships with those 2 institutions. With the North Carolina State University, we have partnered with them to have their students from the Goodnight Scholars program come up to the Volpe Center in October. Last year was the first year they came to the Volpe Center, and we're in the process of planning the session for this year, which they're committed to coming again. And we had over 20 students come from the North Carolina State University, and they got an opportunity to see the various projects, transportation projects that Volpe does. They got an opportunity to have some hands-on learning by actually utilizing our simulators, various simulators that we have, and also they got an opportunity to talk with our HR office about the Pathways program that the federal government has in place, which is an opportunity for college-level students to come into the government and receive paid internships. And we're hoping that we can do the same for our partnership with Wellesley College. So in terms of the number of students that have been coming, we have, the groups range from 20 to 90 students. The typical range is middle school to high school, but also, as I indicated, we have now started developing partnerships with the with college level college level institutions, and I also mentioned already the NETWC program that we have been doing. In addition to those programs that I mentioned, these are just some of the programs that we have done throughout the year. We have Volpe Talks, which is part of the Cambridge Science Festival, which actually celebrated its, I believe, 10th year doing Cambridge Festival on Science. And what we did was what was called Volpe Talks, and it was a STEM. It was on a TED. It was modeled on TED Talks, and basically we showcased 5 different projects that Volpe employees were working on. Volpe employees talked about the particular work that they're doing and how it ties into and contributes to the various modes of transportation and to the public. During that session, we invited both students and the general public to participate in that event. Just last week, we had the Federal Highway Summer Transportation Institute students come. We've been having them come every year to the Volpe Center. Again, they have an opportunity to see our simulators, participate hands-on, talk with our employees about the types of work that they do, and we also displayed different projects, and they have the opportunity to ask questions directly to our employees. Next week, actually, we're having the E2 at MIT. That's a partnership that we have with MIT's engineering department, where students from across the high school students from across the country compete to come to MIT for a week and really be immersed in engineering, and they spend one of their days at the Volpe Center. I also talked about the Goodnight Scholars program that we have and the NetPals program, and also if schools, typically we have other schools that will give us a call and ask if they could come to the center. We're always open and willing to have people come to the center and hear about the type of work that we do. In addition, we started just this year with having our employees go to a local school, community charter school of Cambridge, and talk about how they got involved in the transportation field, how they became an engineer, what motivated them. Particularly, we have been trying to encourage really a diversity of employees to go out to these schools and talk about their career and how they entered into the transportation field. And finally, we throughout the year as well participate in community STEM events, which are science, technology, engineering, arts, and math events that the Cambridge community puts on. And Volpe has, for the past 2 years, participated in those STEM events. And we basically bring a couple of employees and the projects that they're working on, projects that are really hands-on, so the students can get an opportunity to see transportation work in action. And it's really been a hit with the students. And finally, just a list of a number of the different partnerships that we've developed over the last few years in STEM, the MIT Office of Engineering Outreach Programs, MIT Cambridge Science Festival, the City of Cambridge, Cambridge Expanded Learning, STEAM Networks, Cambridge School Volunteers, Community Charter School of Cambridge, Federal Highways, and the North Carolina State University, and we're in the process of collaborating and working with Wellesley College, and hope that that will be another fruitful opportunity for both students and our employees at the Volpe Center. And I would welcome questions at the end. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Helen. And having taken a tour of the Volpe Center, it is actually a really exciting place with a lot of operational and active research activities going on, and I can imagine it as a really fruitful place to bring young people in, as other businesses and operations centers would be as well. We're going to go into a different venue, one of those kind of institutional learning settings, and we're really pleased to have Brett Nicholas here with us from the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry. He's currently the manager of community initiatives, and he's going to talk with us about a program that I understand is actually happening right now, the Summer Brain Games, and with a focus on transportation this year. So with that, turn it over to you, Brett.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Let me just get my screen up here. All right. Are we good? Can everyone see my screen? Make sure I did that right. I think so. Okay. So I'm Brett Nicholas from the Museum of Science and Industry here in Chicago. And this is all about our Summer Brain Games. So Summer Brain Games is a set of activities that we create every year so that families can do some science at home during those months when the kids are not in school. To put Summer Brain Games in context a little bit, I'm going to briefly talk about the museum as an institution and kind of frame this within our larger education programs and outreach strategies. So we opened in 1933. We are a very big institution. We see about 1.5 million visitors every year. We have 14 acres of exhibit space within our walls, and everything that we do is really focused on this vision, to inspire and motivate children to achieve their full potential in science, technology, medicine, and engineering. A couple of key parts about that vision. One, we're focused on children, so we really look at youth and how we can help them reach their full potential. Full potential may mean just having a better understanding of the world around them. Full potential may mean taking a career choice that takes them into a STEM field, even transportation. Inspire and motivate, we're really here to make sure that they have a good grounding in seeing science and technology and engineering as something that is relevant to them, that is meaningful to them, and inspire them to take that next step, even if it's maybe trying to stay awake in that next physics class in high school. So within the museum, we're known for our fantastic exhibits, the coal mine, the U-505 submarine, big exhibits on health and wellness and weather and all kinds of things. But we also do a tremendous amount of work within the Center for the Advancement of Science Education. And this looks an awful lot like Martin's diagram that he showed earlier about ecosystem work, because that is the approach that we take. So while our vision is focused on youth, we also try to help the influencers of youth become better purveyors of science information and science education. So within the Center for the Advancement of Science Education, we work with families, we work with schools, and we work with communities. So for schools that are coming here on field trips, we of course have the whole museum as a learning environment, but we also have specialized learning labs where they can use equipment that they may not have access to within their schools. We work with teachers to provide professional development so that a lot of teachers, especially in the K-8 grades, may not have a background in science. So we help provide not only some content, but also some best practices for science education and help get them comfortable and fully understand inquiry teaching and the importance of hands-on science experiments. We work with families a lot. We have family days, we have opportunities for kids to learn with their parents while they're here at the museum, and then we also work within communities. So this is where a lot of my work happens. I'm the manager of community initiatives here, and we have a few different ways that we reach our communities. One is science clubs. Again, as Martin had mentioned earlier, there's a tremendous amount of science learning that happens outside of the school day, and that time period from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., more and more kids are spending that time in some sort of organized after-school environment. And we are trying to support those after-school environments and encourage them to make science part of that time. So we have about 100 after-school science clubs throughout the Chicago area. We provide not only curriculum and training so that those after-school professionals can become more confident in teaching science, but we also supply materials so that for all of the lessons and curriculum that we write, these teachers, these educators can implement every single one of those lessons with the kit of materials that we supply. This is all free of cost. It's supported through philanthropic support. We also have a teen program where high school students come here to the museum on Saturdays, and on those Saturdays they learn a little bit of content, but more importantly they learn how to communicate that content to the public. We actually have them be teen docents or teen education facilitators and work with the public here, and they teach science concepts. So this has a lot to do with those 21st century skills, how to become good communicators, how to be good presenters, how to gain some responsibility for, not only the presentation, but also taking care of materials and being a professional in the workplace. In all of our community initiatives programs, we really work to engage families. We have big family events where families can learn with their kids while doing science activities. So specifically, one of the programs that we do is this Summer Brain Games. So this is, while we call it Summer Brain Games, these are activities that really are good all year round, but we really promote it during the summer so that we can help parents keep their kids academically active. And I'm using the word academically active in the sense that this is an informal education opportunity, right? We just want kids to have fun, to build things, to have hands-on experience with doing something where they can learn but also really enjoy and really connect to. We've been doing the Summer Brain Games program for 5 years. We always have a different theme. This year's theme is travel and transportation. We have a really great partnership with the Chicago Public Library where they have taken these 8 hands-on activities and incorporated them into their larger Summer Learning Challenge. So a Summer Learning Challenge has participants throughout the city. Last year, almost 100,000 school-age kids participated in their Learning Challenge, and all of them had the opportunity to do some Summer Brain Games. All of the Summer Brain Games are freely available. So there's a website there on the screen, msichicago.org/summerbrain. We keep all of these PDFs out there all the time so that people can use them. So if you are an education provider and you're looking for a quick activity, you can use these. If you are looking to do something with your family on a picnic on a Saturday, there's something there for you. So we really want to get these out and being used. And if you want to use them for a larger education program, you're more than welcome to. So I'm going to show you 2 of our 8 activities that are part of this year's Summer Brain Games program. They're all transportation themed. This first one is called Touch the Sky. It is stomp gliders. All of the activities have the same basic layout. There's a list of materials. We purposefully have made the materials all things that are really easy to get, and more likely than not you have them at home. We want to remove any and all barriers to participation with this program. So there's your materials list, there's simple step-by-step instructions. Stomp gliders is kind of a do-it-yourself stomp rocket. Stomp rockets are a pretty popular toy that you might see in the toy aisle of your local store. This is a do-it-yourself version. You use a 2-liter bottle, pool noodle, some tape to create your launcher, and a ping pong ball and some paper and cardstock to create a rocket. Of course, we talk a little bit about what's happening here. In this case, it is all about air compression. So in the what's happening section, we mentioned a little bit about the science. This is not a one and done kind of activity, so we have a Game On extension where we challenge kids to do an experiment to see if, in this case, if they can make their wings different shapes to see how they fly. And then some tips about things that we found after doing these doing these activities while prototyping them, and then a connection to the museum through a Learn More section where you can come to the museum's transportation gallery and see some of our great transportation exhibits, and then also a connection to reading through the Chicago Public Libraries. So all of the activities have the same general layout. These are all meant to be things that are to inspire kids to have fun with science. We live, of course, in a social media savvy age, so we couldn't put this out there without creating an awesome little Facebook video. So each of these will also have a short little 1 minute or so video, and I'm going to go ahead and show you the one that we have for stomp gliders. So making a stomp glider might not quite be the same as sending a rocket to resupply the International Space Station, or maybe in the future sending a rocket that will send our first astronauts to Mars. But the idea here is that by doing these activities, which are really meant for elementary age kids, by doing these activities at a young age, they get some of the interest and excitement to pursue science later on. So who knows, maybe someone making a stomp glider today will someday work for NASA. Here's another one of our activities. This one is paddle boats, where using some cardboard and duct tape and some rubber bands, you can create your very own little paddle boat. Again, the same layout with the materials and instructions. The science here is that you can use rubber bands to store energy. You wind them up, you hold them in place, you're storing energy in the form of potential energy. You release them, you get that energy of movement or kinetic energy. And here's some connections here to some of our exhibits and also to a book recommendation from the Chicago Public Library. The other thing about these little videos, I'm going to show you the one for this too, is I just really love the music in them. So for that one, I'm not sure if we'll be inspiring kids to build shark boats in the future or not, but certainly building some of these activities. The other activities that are part of the Summer Brain Games set include things like making a hot air balloon out of tissue paper that you can send to the ceiling using a hair dryer, a rubber band powered car, using straws to make a bridge to cover a gap and see how much weight it will hold. All things that are very much hands-on and building. So very quickly, I want to just address why summer learning. I'm sure if you think back to your own time in elementary school, middle school, and high school, when you came back to school in the fall, you forgot a lot. This is a known phenomena. So there was a great study that was done by the After School Alliance called America After 3 p.m. That started to look into this, among other things. But there is an average of 2 or more months of learning loss that happens during the summer. So that means that, of course, in the fall, that teachers have to spend extra time reteaching lessons that they had already taught the year before. So the idea with summer learning is that if you can have kids be active, being academically active during the summer, and again, not academic in the school sense, but just being hands-on and minds-on with some learning activities, you can cut down on some of the summer learning loss. It's also documented that the summer learning loss has a greater impact on low-income students. The National Summer Learning Association has looked into this achievement gap, specifically looking at the difference between low and high income families and what happens during the summer. And to no surprise, low-income youth lack some of the options that higher income families have during the summer, and so their summer learning loss is greater. So I would encourage those of you that are out there working with that are out there like doing education programs to work with those kids that can get the most out of it. Target some low-income students to help close this achievement gap. The good news is that the effects of summer learning endure. So they really help move forward a child's academic achievement. So there's this poster has a lot of great information on it. I pulled out a few key points, but look at the National Summer Learning Association if you're interested in finding out more about this. Transportation. One of the things about transportation is it is really relevant to everybody's, to kids' lives. In that supporting productive STEM programs and out-of-school time settings study that Martin mentioned, we know that kids will be more responsive to STEM learning when it's relevant to their aspirations, experiences, and interests. kids love planes, trains, and automobiles. I mean, so let's get them excited about it. There's a lot of opportunities to connect them to science, technology, and engineering. When you're building these kind of do-it-yourself transportation toys, you have to figure some stuff out. You might have to try things a couple of different ways. There are great connections to our museum, so we can invite kids to come back and see the transportation gallery. That's what this photo is of here. This is a Spitfire that we have hanging from the ceiling, and a full-size 727 that's inside the building hanging off of one of our balconies that kids can go in. And by the way, we also make admission, we allow free admission to the museum for kids that have participated in summer brain games. So we have a promotion where if you register for the program, you get a free admission back to the museum. And then also reading connections. So there's lots of great books out there about transportation, and the Chicago Public Libraries help us identify some of those books so that we can connect reading to our STEM education program. Once again, Summer Brain Games is free to use anywhere, anytime, so use it with your families, use it at a family reunion, at a picnic. If you're running an education program, feel free to grab these activities and use them. We've had great success in finding partners with libraries and community centers to kind of start to build that ecosystem to maybe, you know, if we have some books that are about transportation that are being read and some activities about that are transportation themed that are being done, you know, start to connect some of those different parts of a child's learning. And then I would just encourage people to focus on communities with the greatest need for learning opportunities, because closing that achievement gap is something that I think is really vital for a successful future. There's my contact information. Feel free to email me, and hopefully there will be some questions now that I have wrapped up. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Brett. Really an interesting series, and we really appreciate the accessibility to your resources around the country. This idea of sharing not just practices, but direct access to curriculum, programs, and resources is something that the workforce centers are engaged with helping make that more accessible no matter where people are. We're going to go back briefly to Martin to kind of bring this together, and also to kind of frame kind of an initial question to each of the presenters. We do have a series of questions, and anything we don't get to today, we will be asking the presenters to take a look at those questions. We'll assemble those responses and be posting them out to everybody who has participated. Martin, do you want to give us a bit of an overview summation?
Sure, I can do that. These were three very different examples, and I like the fact that we look at the diversity here of possibilities that people have to bring transportation to youth and more throughout the community. I want to begin this by saying that we saw examples where partnerships helped, that Helen gave us, and Marsha as well. We look at the idea of audiences and thinking about audiences in different ways. When Brett said that this is great for kids, Marsha reminds us, oh, but wait a minute, are we leaving out a whole bunch of people? And that is, how do we frame transportation for individuals? And we have to keep in mind where they're coming from, where they want to go. Is this a technical engineering kind of thing that we frame it for, and it's more interesting to boys? And I don't mean to go into the nature and nurture debate, but there is some preferences. Or are we looking at other components of transportation, looking at this more holistically and think about the purpose of it, and potentially make it more significant to others? And I like that all three of our presenters basically show you that the significance comes from understanding and seeing some of the practical components of it, either by hands-on or by seeing it in the community or by connecting to professionals in the field. The idea here is it is not an abstract subject matter that is basically reduced to scientific concepts. That is also the strength for using transportation as a broader umbrella to infuse or teach STEM within a broader context of societal need. That's actually useful for teachers as well as for educators in, let's say, nature centers, science centers, and all sorts of places in after school. Is the idea that it's not a dry concept of of forces and speed and technology only. It has a purpose. It serves us, and I think we can see in these examples that's where the educators want to go. To me, that's an important component of all of this. The question that I have for all three presenters is, to what degree do you make your programs connect to other programs? And it's basically that push towards using a learning ecology, whether that's within my community or across communities, where you make connections. And I know, of course, you all are, but I want to see whether you can make it more explicit. You all are partnering with other organizations to make things available. But it's this idea that I don't just encounter certain things in a certain place, that I make it more fluid and open and let people understand. And I know that, of course, we talked about the idea that you already have these field trips embedded in some of the programs where people go to places. I think, Marsha, you talked about that, where you see where it's happening. Where is it relevant? Where do people really in their profession encounter this? So these are a few questions. And then there's this question of a pathway. We used to talk about pipelines, a leaking pipeline, a very bad metaphor when it comes to job creation, because we don't realize that things come in from the side even as things dribble and get lost. So now we talk more about pathways. How can we open this up to people to understand that there is something for me in the future to be involved and engaged, whether it's a career, whether it's simply something I need to know in order to be a citizen. And that's a component of it I think that's important. And I want to ask all three of them the way in which they think of this, not just learning across spaces and but also across time, this whole pathway idea. And with that, we'll open it up again and see whether there are other questions that then we can see that come from the chat box.
Yeah, why don't we start with Marsha? If you have some thoughts on either of those directions that Martin brought up.
Yes, so Martin, thanks, because we don't do enough partnering, I believe, on the national level. I do believe, however, locally our chapters are doing an excellent job partnering with schools, Boys and Girls programs, Girl Scouts, so they are reaching out. And you know, you're right, you get a better product. But the other thing that you get to do when you partner with these other organizations is also build the awareness of the need to expose these young people to career opportunities in transportation. As far as our pathways go, you know, again, it's all about, you know, you develop these STEM programs and you're exposing these young people to the opportunities, then what? One of the things that we're working on is to develop stronger student chapters at the university level and getting them involved. We are already doing it really well on the professional level. When folks, women graduate from college and you know, have entry-level positions, we are there waiting to introduce them and connect them to some of the most high-profiled individuals in the industry. So that's some of the ways that we're doing it at WTS, but I think these two topics that you just brought up are essential.
Great. Helen, do you have some thoughts on this?
Sure. Partnering is just absolutely essential to the success of any STEM program. I know for our program at Volpe, when we were thinking about how we can really build a STEM program, we started thinking about, okay, let's reach out to the community, see what's out there, see who's doing what, and you know, offer our skills, offer our talent, and say we're really interested in helping. And honestly, that just germinated into so many other relationships that we've built in a very short period of time. We initially reached out to you know, where Volpe is located. MIT is right across the way. We have a lot of biomedical companies, Biogen, Genzyme, and all the others right around us. we reached out to Draper Lab and found out about what they were doing and their STEM initiatives. And that just led to other connections, and it really built our network. I think once we built those initial partnerships, other schools, community organizers started reaching out to us and saying, we heard about your program, we heard about what you're doing, and we want to see if we can come to the center. We've seen that gray brick building for many years, and I have no idea what's going on in it. So I think people were excited about the opportunity to actually find out about the Volpe Center, and it really has mushroomed from there. So our partnerships started small and just has really grown over time. And in terms of pathways, I mean, as I mentioned, our internship program, the federal government's internship program is called the Pathways Program, and it is an opportunity for college students and graduate students to come into the center either as interns or as recent grads and get involved in project-based work and actually, you know, receive a salary while they're learning. Actually, those internship programs, we've been involved in the federal internship programs for many years and have really leveraged that to build our workforce. Actually, a number of our managers have actually come in as interns, work their way up through the organization, and are now, you know, 20 years, 30 years later, are managers. So it has really been very fruitful for us and for the employees who have come in through our various internship programs.
Excellent. Thank you, Helen. Brett, do you want to follow up on some of what you shared?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So as far as partnerships go, we only recently started partnering with the Chicago Public Library 3 years ago. So we had 2 years of running Summer Brain Games without that partnership, and 2.5 kind of years of working with the Chicago Public Library. And the strength of that partnership is unbelievable, and it goes both ways. So with the Chicago Public Libraries, they have a huge dissemination mechanism. They reach hundreds of thousands of kids throughout all of the branches that they have specifically focused on summer learning in June, July, and August here in Chicago. And we were able to provide some real STEM expertise as far as, you know, helping them create some really quality programs. They've also given us a lot back as far as recommended reading, and in almost all of our community education programs, you know, that happen during the school year, our science clubs and whatnot, we also include recommended reading lists based on their recommendations for all of our program, because we really want to kind of be take a cross-curricular approach with our STEM education and include reading and literature in addition to art and other things. So so that partnership has been absolutely incredible. And then also those times when we can work with an organization that has a network of multiple sites, something like the Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA. It's just, for us, a really fantastic way for us to support learning throughout their entire organization, and we can bring a lot to the table as far as curriculum development and activities and materials. With regard to career pathways, you know, we get a lot of feedback from museum guests, you know, people who are maybe members or who are returning for the first time, and they'll say, you know, I became a doctor because I walked through the giant heart, you know, back in 1966 or something like that. And so we feel that our best role when it comes to career pathways is really being inspirational and providing really fantastic high quality experiences so that people know that there are these careers out there that are related to science, technology, engineering, and medicine that maybe they didn't know of before, and then just letting people know what those career opportunities are, what they look like. We have other education programs not specific to summer brain games where we have scientists come in to the museum and museum guests and our teens in our Science Minors and Achievers programs can talk directly to sciences. We have career days. So we really just want to get kids at a young age aware of different kinds of careers in transportation and a lot of other STEM STEM type careers, and then also just have really fun experiences so that they have something to hold on to as a great memory when maybe they're in a tougher academic situation.
Great, thanks, Brett. A number of the questions that have come up, really do address this idea of pathways or outcomes in terms of, if we're going to invest in education, and in particularly in now informal education, how do we measure whether or not it's actually achieving the goal? And we had a specific question here for Marcia related to Transportation U, and they wanted to know if you have any specific methodology in place for tracking those participants and seeing if they ended up either in transportation STEM or even general STEM careers.
Yeah, so we have we just begun a continuity program where we are tracking the students that have gone through the program. We have like I said, we're just in our 5th year, so at this point we have our first college graduates, and so our challenge has been getting them to respond, to collect the data. But we are starting to get enough data that we could possibly make a statement such as Transportation U matters, and this is why, and this is how many young women we have brought into our program and how many of them have either went into the STEM fields or how many of them went into a transportation career. So we currently don't have it published, but we are collecting the data.
Great. Another one of our viewers in terms of thinking about the partnerships is interested in whether any of you work with your local workforce development boards and their youth divisions. Is that a partnership that you've explored for particularly reaching out to more diverse bodies of youth or youth who don't necessarily have access to programs like this or may not think that these programs are for them? Maybe starting back with Brett, is that a partnership that you've looked at in Chicago?
That is not a partnership that we've currently pursued, but it's something that I think would be a very good option for us to look to.
And Marcia, do you know if any of your local chapters are working with the local workforce development boards?
We are not here in Washington, and I am not aware of any of our chapters working with workforce development boards, but it's a great idea.
Okay. And I don't know if Helen, is that something in Cambridge that you've looked at as a possible partnership?
No, we have not. What we've tried to just increase the level of diversity, what we have been doing is to really develop partnerships with the universities and with engineering programs and organizations, Hispanic engineers, and persons with disabilities, and trying to develop some partnerships there to increase the level of diversity within the STEM fields. So those are some of the partnerships that we are working on and working on in partnership actually with our HR office.
Great. Well, maybe in keeping with the theme of partnerships for each of you, as you've built those, what are the key elements that you feel are required for creating productive and sustainable partnerships? What are the kind of lessons that you've learned that you might share with others in building those partnerships, and for many of you holding on to those partnerships year after year? And maybe starting with Marcia?
I think that it really goes down to your values. And so what WTS is valuing in our programs needs to align with the schools that we're partnering with. Our value is to advance young women, to build the awareness with young women. And not that, we don't need to advance men, because we certainly do. But WTS is here to focus on women. So for me, it's just making sure your values are aligned, and then I would say making sure that your leaders, your leadership, your partner leadership, they're in alignment with one another. And I think that when you forge these partnerships and your values are aligned and your leadership is aligned, there's nothing you can't accomplish. And it's so much easier to partner with someone and go a mile than it is to go by yourself and only move a few inches. So I would say the most important thing are those values.
Great, thanks. Helen, any thoughts on lessons from your position?
Well, I think for us, it's really been really following through and delivering on what we say we will deliver. In terms of the STEM events that we've done at the various schools, when that organization first reached out to us, they said, would you be willing to, have some of your projects, come on site and have students be able to, to have hands-on opportunity to with these projects. And we were able to get employees who gave their time. These events are happening in the evening, but the employees were willing to pack up their projects, bring it to the schools, and stay there for the duration, talk with the students, give the students the opportunity to interact with the various demos. And I think that went a long way in, we, every time now there's a STEAM event, we get a call, we get an email, they want us to be there. The same thing with the schools having the opportunity to come to the center and see our various projects and simulators and whatnot. We really use each opportunity to give them a full, depth and breadth and scope of the types of work that we do in the transportation field and how they could potentially fit into this work. And I think the students really walk away feeling like they can see themselves in these various careers. I think as well our employees are really enthusiastic and passionate about their work, and I think that translates when they share about the types of activities that they're doing. So it to me has been contagious and has really led to so many more other schools or organizations reaching out to us.
Great. Thank you so much, Helen. I think with that, we're coming to the end of our time, so I'm going to wrap up today's webinar. I want to really thank our four presenters for a really rich presentation, background framework, as well as some really important program specifics and examples that are great learning opportunities for all of us, and hopefully can be translated to continuing to further the learning in the transportation STEM area. We do have a series of kind of other questions grouped around some of these themes. We will be reaching out to our presenters to see if they want to add some additional responses to those questions and posting them back to our resource page for this webinar. Each of you who have participated, and thank you very much for joining us today, will get a follow-up to let you know when the webinar itself will be posted and accessible to share with your colleagues, hopefully, going forward, as well as other resources in the presentations that you saw today. So again, a big thank you to Brett and Helen, Marcia and Martin, and to our participating network of workforce centers around the country, and to the TRB Education and Training Committee, which really helped initiate this whole series of webinars. With that, we'll conclude. We invite you to continue to reach out to us with questions, thoughts on future programs, and other opportunities that we might work together on this. So with that, we'll conclude today's webinar. Thank everybody. Have a great afternoon.